Hello and welcome to today's video. My name is Jeannie and today it's going to be a really short video because I'm losing light and it's also quite cold out here. But I don't film inside because like the lighting is even worse inside. But I wanted to chat a little bit about an interesting dynamic I've been noticing between me and my brother. He's the person I spend the most amount of time right now, and I've never really, like, I've looked at his chart before, but I don't really dive deep into it because he's not interested. But there's this pattern that was showing up more than once. I'm like, okay, hold on, let me go to his chart and see what's going on here. Not that I need his chart, but it kind of gave me a little bit more of a visual picture of like, okay, this is potentially what could be going on. So kind of like the hiccup we were experiencing is like, sometimes he'll ask me a question and it's so hard for me to answer the question because I know what type of response he's looking for. Like, he's looking for a straight like yes or no, very basic response, and I kind of want to go like into like, well, it kind of depends, you know. But it's the 41, it's gate 41. But anyways, okay, let me backtrack a little bit and tell y'all a little bit about myself. If you watched my other videos, you probably know this by now. If you don't, well, that's okay too. I'm a 6'2" self-projected projector. I have a defined head, ajna, throat, and G-center, and they're all connected straight down the middle channels, which are all part of individual circuitry. My brother, on the other hand, I printed his chart to like reference it, and it printed in black and white. So I'm like, that's not gonna help. So I took a picture on my phone, but again, like, I haven't gone deep into the chart, and I don't really need to because like I already kind of know how to address this. But my brother's an emotional Manny-Gen, and I've kind of been thinking a lot about emotional authorities because I hear a lot of people talk about like their lows and how hard it is to navigate a low. But with my brother, like, I've never really felt or seen him experience a low. Like when he was younger, I'm talking like toddler, we're 16.5 years apart, so I remember. He would have more explosive tantrums, and that's where like I could see it a little bit more because like he, again, like 16 years apart, but whenever he would go through like one of these energy surges, he would literally knock me to the ground where I just could not hold him. He had so much, like, he was itty bitty, but he was like powerful. So I kind of see signs of his emotional wave more like when he was younger. Now I feel like we've both done a lot of work around like our childhood trauma and things like that, where he feels pretty stable to me, and I am very, very sensitive to like the energy around me, and I can't quite recall a time where I felt like his low or his high. What I do feel like I sometimes pick up on is a little bit of like nervous energy, and he does have like the 4130. He's actually got 2 channels from the root to the emotional solar plexus. But even though, because I tend to be a little bit mindful when I'm around emotional authorities, because it's not only like taking it in and amplifying it, but I feel like I get a sense for their wave way before they do. So, and especially with like Manny-Gens, where there can be a little bit of that energy of like very fast, like pivoting very quickly, I've personally find that it's easier for me to feel a little bit off balance. Now I do have gate, which one is it? 5, which has to do with like timing patterns, things like that. So I feel like this one for me, it shows up more of like, I kind of like, if I'll ask him, okay, let me give y'all an example. I will ask him, are we doing anything like for tomorrow, so I can kind of get come up with a plan, because if we're going out, being a projector, I like to conserve my energy for when, like, if we do have to go out. If I know that we're not going to be going out, well, then I don't have to save any energy, you know. I can plan my day however I need to, work, whatever. If I want to go out, I'll go out by myself. That's not an issue. But again, it's primarily to make sure. That kind of looks like a weird piece of hair. It's a cat. Let me scooch over. So the reason I ask him is just to make sure that I have enough energy in order to be able to do the things we need to do that day. And I noticed that whenever, I noticed this with Mom too, when they switch up the plan on me, it's kind of like, I don't know what to do. And it could be the channel of structuring, where I'm trying to think of like, okay, what needs to be done, and trying to mentally come up with like the shortest way to get everything done. But he knows this, and I told him, like, initially when I started noticing this pattern, I'm like, look, my brain has a hard time pivoting. It's not that I don't want to, I just need a little bit of time to kind of like be able to change my direction. And he started picking up on it, because like he tends to know me pretty well. I tend to know him pretty well too. So at times where he saw that I was really struggling, he would say, look, for example, like, I want to take you out to dinner, and I know this is last minute, and I know that you tend to not do so well with change, but all you have to do is get ready and get in the car. So it's like he'll help me out by like giving me directions. But I've also noticed that if like the underlying vibe to him giving me directions is controlling, I tend to want to be a little bit more rebellious, because like I can feel the energy of control underneath. Now he does have like a lot of leadership energy, and I feel like sometimes that's where we kind of collide a little bit. We clash a little bit, where it's like I don't want to be controlled, and he kind of like wants to have a little bit of control, but I don't really think he's aware. Maybe, I don't know, we haven't really had that conversation. Maybe we'll talk about it soon. But if I notice that his underlying energy is just to help me out, because he knows that I can have a hard time pivoting, it's well received for me. And it's also kind of like giving me an opportunity to embrace like being led by the masculine, you know, not seeing it as like, oh my gosh, he's trying to control me. And again, there are times where I do feel that sense of control, and I feel like my incarnation cross really comes up with mine. It tends to be like breaking out of any systems or people that try to control me. I've really been feeling that like within the last year or so. So that's one thing. But okay, let me talk about the most recent pattern that I was seeing. It's like, okay, on Monday we went to Panera to go have dinner there, because we had like a coupon, and like we were each gonna eat for under like $5. It was ridiculously a super good deal. So as I'm driving there, and it was like one that I had never been to, I kind of like, I'm getting hungry, and when I get hungry, like I get antsy, because it's like I need to eat, and I need to eat soon. And also I'm trying to like be aware of like, where is the GPS taking me, because it was also acting like a little bit glitchy. It wasn't updating as quickly as it normally does. So on our way there, he was asking me if I wanted a dessert, and he's like reading me the options, and we're both taste cognition, okay, so keep that in mind. Which is like really good, because like we like really yummy food. Like if it's not delicious, we're like, no, like if we're gonna spend money, it's got to be delicious. But anyways, he's kind of like reading me the options, but in the app they have like the pictures, and for me, I'm like, he's like, well, what do you want? I'm like, I don't know, I kind of want to see the pictures. And then in my mind, I was thinking, okay, like, are we going to share? Are we going to like each get our own, and if he doesn't want to share, that's okay. That's going to alter what I end up choosing, because in my mind it's like, again, we normally don't go to Panera. Being taste cognition, being markets environment, I like to sample, I like to taste, I like to try, I like to have different options. He tends to have like a lot of more, it varies, because I feel like he has more manifestor energy. I haven't checked his channels, but I feel more of like him taking initiative. It's very natural in him, because he would always get in trouble when he was little for like just deciding things on his own. But I feel the generator in him with like, when I ask him like, what do you want to eat, it's like he goes blank. But it's because it's too many options, he can't narrow it down. So I'll ask him the question differently. Do you want to eat at home or do you want to eat out? Okay, and then depending on what he gives me, then I can narrow down or give him options about like what we could do. So okay, let me go back to the Panera story. I was kind of like, I don't know what I want, because I mean, I could kind of like narrow down with like 2 or 3 things that kind of sounded good, but I wanted to see the picture, because I knew that if I saw the picture, I was going to be able to tell what I wanted more. So then I'm asking him like, well, what are you gonna get? And he starts to get a little bit triggered. And I kind of already know where this is going, but he's asking me this question, well, or he's saying, you know, it doesn't matter what I want, what do you want? And then again, in my mind, defined ajna and defined head, I'm thinking, well, it depends, because if we're not sharing, that's going to change what I'm going to pick, because then I'm going to pick the one that I want the most. But if we are sharing, it kind of depends on what he's choosing, because if it's the same thing that I want, well, then I can get something else, and then we can go half-half, and we get to both try something new, right? So that's what's going on in my head. And I guess this is what I'm going to tweak. And it's just communication-wise. Asking him or telling him that I'm processing, that I'm thinking about it, because I can see all the possibilities, and I need a little bit of time to feel into what it is that I want. But he tends to be sometimes a little bit short-tempered, and again, undefined solar plexus, I feel like, you know, I take that in, and I for me it expresses like as nervousness. I feel like I kind of shrink in a little bit, and then he picks up on that, and then he gets irritated because he knows that I'm having that reaction because of his mood, or, you know, the way he says things. And I asked him the other day when I was thinking about filming this, I'm like, do you ever feel like pressure in your head, like when you're around me? Because he's got like a completely open head, and I have like the 61-24, so I think I actually end up defining his head, because he's got the 24. Is it the 24? Yeah, it's the 24. So when he's around me, I tend to define his head, and he's like, no. Or I asked him if he felt any headaches or anything like that. He's like, no, I just get annoyed. That's kind of like the way he put it. Like, I don't get mad at you, I just get annoyed, because I guess, again, so many questions. He does get really frustrated when I just bombard him with questions, but it's like one question after another without really giving him space to answer the first question. So that's kind of like on me, but again, I like options, and he tends to like, once he picks, he's good with that. So this is what I've been doing too recently. Like, I'll give him an option for like, mostly it's food stuff. So we fight about food, but like, what are we gonna eat? So let's say we're eating out, and I'll give him options, you know, pizza, burgers, tacos, and then he'll pick, like, let's say he decides burgers, and then I'm like, oh, but we could also do Chinese or this or that, and then he's kind of like, I already decided. I'm like, but in my head, I'm like, what if, you know, there's a better option? I am a line 3 and one of the Jinkies spheres, which is like a fear of commitment, which I feel kind of also applies not only in relationships but in other areas too. Like, do I really want that? And so I was kind of like thinking, is there a better option? Is there a better option? So we're on our way to Panera. Let's go back to the Panera story. He's getting annoyed. I'm getting annoyed. I know he's hungry because he had been working for our business. It's about time for me to eat. I can't see like where the GPS is taking me, so it's kind of like this big combination of like stuff that wasn't ideal. And we're kind of like getting annoyed at each other because of what he's asking and the way I'm answering. But what I'm realizing is like I think we're both saying the same thing, we're just saying it differently, and it feels like we're saying something different, but we're really not. And he's like, yeah, I know. He's like, you're probably right, but what are we gonna do about this? So kind of like the pivot that I'm planning to make like from this point forward, like playing with, is communicating, saying, okay, hold on, give me a minute to narrow down my options. And then, because I tell him, like, I ask you these questions because then that kind of alters, and I explain my thought process, but he's not as patient. So part of me gets a little bit triggered, and I'm like, why do I have to be more patient than he, like with him, or more accommodating to like what triggers him, and he can't do the same for me, you know? So there's that layer. But I think in this particular case, it was a little bit more annoying because we were both hungry. But normally we do pretty well communicating. It's just recently this thing where it's like I give him an option and he decides, he locks that in, and in my mind I'm still thinking of other possibilities. 41. So now what I'm thinking of doing is taking my time and saying, okay, hold on, give me a couple of minutes to think about this so that I can narrow down my options. Because another thing that I do is I tend to kind of like ask him more like what he wants, because I feel like he's a bit of a pickier eater than I am. And it's like, if he picks where he wants to eat, I can narrow down from that place like what I want to eat. Like for example, if he wants like a double cheeseburger from McDonald's, which we haven't really been doing McDonald's much lately, but let's say he wants a double cheeseburger and I'm not feeling a double cheeseburger, but I could still feel like the filet of fish sandwiches, my body will eat those happily. You know, I will alter my option based on the menu. But many times he's like, because he knows that it's kind of like hard for me to put myself first, like what do I want, where do I want to eat, it's like he helps me work through that, but then I resort to like, well, what do you want, you know? So it's just again about creating more awareness around this for me, and getting more comfortable with saying, okay, this is where I want to go. And if he wants that too, great. And if he doesn't, well then, you know, I still get to have my food. And then, you know, we might need to do 2 stops or things like that. So, I hope that made sense. I know there was a lot in there because, again, they're like layered concepts. It's not just one thing that I see. I see like a combination of factors from like my chart and his chart that play out in like how we interact. So let me see real quickly at his chart. Yeah, because he's got an open head, undefined ajna, which I tend to define his head and ajna with my 2 channels. And then I need to run a connection chart because I've been trying to do this mentally, but it's easier if I do a connection chart. But yeah, he's got like 3 motor centers. He's got a lot of gates at the throat center, which, yeah, he's always been a talker. So that makes sense. So he's got like defined throat, G, sacral, root, and solar plexus. So it's an interesting combination, that's for sure. But yeah, that's all I'm going to share for now because, again, I'm running out of light. Once I run a connection chart, I'll might do a part 2 and give y'all a little bit more of like examples of like how our dynamic plays out. But I find like we don't bicker often. We've never had like a full-blown fight. Not that I think the biggest fight we had when he was like around 3. And my mom went to like vitamin shop to pick up some supplements, and she left me in the car with him, and when she came back she found both of us crying, and I started crying because he told me he didn't love me. And he said that because I said something to him, like he was doing something he wasn't supposed to do, and I'm like, I'm going to tell mom. And then he said, yeah, well, I don't love you. Oh boy, did I start crying. It was ridiculous. But it hurt. Like, it hurt me to hear him, like, even though he's 3 years old and I knew he probably didn't mean it. Mom found both of us crying in the car when she got back. But other than that, like, we have pretty good communication, or when we see something, you know, pop up, we address it relatively quickly. And I think that's one of the two key pieces: awareness and communication. And then we'll add a third one: a willingness to honor how each person operates. Okay, so that's all I'm going to talk about right now. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, takeaways, comments, any of that, feel free to pop it down below. Otherwise, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is @JanieSalcedo. I think that's everything. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.